My friends, look around you. History is not written by the timid, nor do monuments honor the meek. Time and again, it is the ruthless who rise, while the gentle fade into silence. Nietzsche was clear. The world does not bend to morality, to weakness, or to pity. It bends to power, to will, to the force of those who dare impose themselves upon existence. You may protest this truth, hoping for a gentler vision of the world, but the reality stands. The ruthless win because they dare to do what others cannot. What does it mean to be ruthless? It does not always mean cruelty for cruelty's sake. It means refusing to be shackled by conventions, refusing to bow to sentiment when it opposes necessity, refusing to let weakness masquerade as virtue. Ruthless people act with clarity and force, while the rest are paralyzed by doubt, guilt, or fear of judgment. Nietzsche urged us to face this without illusion. Life is a struggle of wills, and only those who master theirs rise above the herd. But we must understand this ruthlessness carefully. It is not thoughtless violence. It is the ability to cut away illusions, to sacrifice comfort, and to assert one's vision with relentless will. It is the courage to endure hatred, misunderstanding, and isolation for the sake of power and creation. The ruthless win because they embody life's raw law. Strength is what creates. Weakness is what obeys. Morality, as Nietzsche saw it, is not eternal law, but a construct, a tool designed by the weak to restrain the strong. It is a system that teaches obedience, guilt, and submission, cloaking weakness in the language of virtue. When someone dares to transcend these inherited codes, they are called ruthless. But in truth, they are simply refusing to be paralyzed by rules that were never meant to liberate, but to control. The ruthless win because they strip away these illusions and reclaim the raw power of will. Most people live under the weight of morality like oxen pulling a cart. They ask themselves endlessly, is this right? Will I be judged? Will others approve? These questions slow them down, dilute their energy, and keep them bound to mediocrity. Nietzsche understood that morality, especially the morality of pity, softens the human spirit until it no longer dares to act. In contrast, the ruthless person moves without apology. They do not beg permission from the herd before asserting their will. They recognize that greatness requires a willingness to transgress, to say no to inherited codes, and to act even when society labels their strength as cruelty. This does not mean that ruthlessness is blind brutality. Nietzsche despised mindless violence and celebrated creative strength. The ruthless individual does not waste energy in random destruction. Rather, they are ruthless in their refusal to let conventional morality dictate their choices. They cut through the noise of public opinion, through the chains of guilt, and through the softness that keeps others enslaved to comfort. They act with a clarity that frightens the herd because they expose what most are too afraid to admit, that the rules we cling to are fragile fictions. History is filled with examples. The leaders, creators, and visionaries who shaped civilizations were not bound by the morality of their time. They dared to act beyond good and evil, forging paths that others condemned but eventually followed. Their ruthlessness was their refusal to be held hostage by the moral codes designed to tame them. They stood apart, willing to be hated, mocked, or feared, because they understood that hesitation born of morality is the death of greatness. The herd finds safety in moral conformity, but this safety is stagnation. It prevents the risk, the daring, the audacity that true creation demands. The ruthless win because they are free from these invisible chains. They do not confuse goodness with obedience, nor weakness with virtue. They measure their actions by strength, vision, and necessity, not by the shallow judgments of the crowd. In the end, the ruthless reveal a truth Nietzsche wanted us to face. Morality is often the mask of fear. To transcend it is to uncover the raw law of life. Those who dare to act, to impose, to carve their path, will prevail. Those who wait for permission will forever remain servants. The ruthless win not because they are cruel, but because they refuse to bow to the morality that paralyzes everyone else. Ruthlessness is often misunderstood as coldness or cruelty, but in Nietzsche's philosophy, it is more accurately seen as liberation from the herd mentality. The herd mentality is the force that keeps people obedient, conforming to the expectations of society, and terrified of standing out. Most people live as part of this herd. They think what others think, feel what others feel, and follow rules without ever asking whether those rules serve them. They find comfort in belonging, in being approved of, in blending into the crowd. But this comfort comes at a price. They surrender their individuality, their freedom, and their capacity for greatness. The ruthless person, however, refuses to be bound by the herd. They are willing to stand alone, to be criticized, to be feared, and even to be hated if it means living authentically. To Nietzsche, this was the mark of a higher type of human being, the one who dares to reject the shallow safety of conformity and instead shapes their own destiny. It is not cruelty that separates them from the herd. It is courage. Courage to think independently, courage to act decisively, courage to endure isolation if that is what freedom demands. Herd mentality thrives on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of punishment, fear of being seen as different. The herd enforces its rules by shaming those who step out of line. Don't be too ambitious. Don't question the system. Don't make others uncomfortable with your strength. But the ruthless break this cycle of fear. They understand that real respect is never given to those who hide in the crowd. Respect belongs to those who carve their own path, even if it means walking alone. By refusing to obey herd values, they stand above them, forcing others to acknowledge their strength whether they like it or not. Nietzsche saw morality itself as a product of the herd, a set of rules invented to restrain the strong and keep everyone equal in mediocrity. To be ruthless is to break free from this invisible prison. It is to stop asking, "Is this acceptable? Will others approve?" Instead, the ruthless ask, "Does this serve my growth? Does this reflect my strength?" Their lives are not guided by fear of what others will say, but by their own vision and will. Paradoxically, while the herd often condemns ruthlessness, it is also secretly fascinated by it. People admire leaders, creators, and pioneers who dared to stand apart, even if they once mocked or feared them. The ruthless awaken something deep in others, the longing to escape conformity themselves. This is why those who reject the herd often rise to positions of influence and power. They embody the freedom that others secretly crave but are too afraid to pursue. To free yourself from the herd is not easy. It requires a kind of inner ruthlessness, the ability to cut away the need for approval, the willingness to withstand judgment, and the determination to remain true to yourself. The ruthless win because they refuse to drown in the mediocrity of the crowd. They prove, by their very existence, that freedom and individuality are worth more than the false comfort of belonging. In this way, ruthlessness is not destruction but liberation, rebellion against the suffocating grip of conformity. Ruthlessness, when stripped of its negative associations, can be seen as a force of survival and progress. Nietzsche understood that life itself is not gentle. It is conflict, competition, and struggle. Nature does not reward weakness. The world is not arranged to comfort us, but to challenge us, to test us, to demand from us the strength necessary to continue. And in this unforgiving arena, ruthlessness becomes not a choice but a necessity. It is the willingness to do what is required to survive, to endure, and ultimately to advance. The history of humanity demonstrates this clearly. Every civilization, every innovation, every leap forward has been driven not by those who played it safe, but by those who dared to be ruthless in pursuit of their vision. To invent, to conquer, to build requires disrupting the old and destroying the comfortable illusions people cling to. It requires stepping into conflict rather than avoiding it. The ruthless person understands that progress always demands sacrifice, whether it be of outdated beliefs, entrenched institutions, or the fragile comfort of the masses. Nietzsche saw that those who shy away from this reality inevitably become victims of it. The person who cannot be ruthless when survival demands it becomes dependent on others. They place their fate in the hands of stronger individuals or systems, and in doing so, they surrender their autonomy. The ruthless, by contrast, ensure their survival by refusing to bow to weakness. They adapt, they fight, they endure, and they thrive where others collapse. This is why, in the long march of history, it is always the strong-willed, the ruthless, who carve the future. This is not simply about physical survival, but psychological and spiritual survival as well. Life constantly confronts us with obstacles, betrayals, losses, and chaos. A person without the ability to be ruthless against their own fears, doubts, and hesitations will be crushed by these realities. But the one who can summon ruthlessness toward their own weakness, who can cut away excuses, destroy illusions, and endure pain, emerges stronger and more resilient. Nietzsche believed that greatness is born from struggle, and struggle requires a ruthless spirit willing to push through suffering rather than flee from it. At the same time, ruthlessness is the driver of progress. It is the force that pushes humanity to evolve, to transcend what is, and to reach for what could be. The ruthless do not accept the limits placed upon them by tradition or authority. They break those limits. They do not cower in the face of adversity. They transform it into an opportunity for growth. Without such individuals, humanity would stagnate in safety and conformity. With them, the world moves forward, sometimes violently, always disruptively, but ultimately toward greater heights. In this sense, ruthlessness is not cruelty but clarity. It is the recognition that life is war, that comfort is a trap, and that only those willing to embrace the struggle will prevail. Nietzsche teaches us that survival and progress are never guaranteed. They belong to those willing to seize them with unflinching determination. The ruthless win not because they lack compassion, but because they possess the courage to do what survival and progress demand, even when others shrink back in fear. One of Nietzsche's most profound insights was that much of what we take to be truth, morality, or value is in fact illusion. Societies invent stories about goodness, justice, equality, humility, not because these things are eternal or absolute, but because they serve a function. They keep order, they restrain the strong, and they comfort the weak. These illusions are powerful because they disguise themselves as unquestionable truths. People inherit them without thinking, repeat them without examining, and build their entire lives around them. Yet, Nietzsche warned, those who remain trapped in these illusions will never be free. Only the ruthless, the ones willing to cut through comforting lies, can see reality as it is, and in doing so, claim real power. Ruthlessness here does not mean cruelty toward others, but a merciless honesty with oneself and with the world. It is the refusal to accept illusions simply because they are convenient or because everyone else believes in them. It takes ruthlessness to look at morality and ask, who created this? Who benefits from it? Does it make me stronger or does it weaken me? Such questions are uncomfortable, even frightening, because they pull the ground out from under our inherited certainties. The herd clings to these values because they provide safety and belonging, but the ruthless individual knows that false values ultimately imprison the human spirit. Take, for instance, the illusion that humility is always virtuous. On the surface, humility seems noble, but Nietzsche would argue it is often a disguise for weakness. It trains people to shrink from ambition, to silence their strength, and to feel guilt for desiring greatness. The ruthless person breaks this illusion. They recognize that humility, when taken as an absolute, is a tool to suppress excellence. Instead, they choose to honor ambition and self-assertion as natural and necessary forces of life. By doing so, they rise where others remain small. Similarly, many are taught to worship equality as the highest good. But Nietzsche observed that true equality is impossible. Human beings are not the same, and pretending otherwise denies the natural differences in strength, talent, and will. The ruthless person sees through this illusion and accepts inequality as part of life. Rather than being ashamed of their strength, they embrace it, knowing that progress comes not from sameness, but from the elevation of the exceptional. Breaking illusions requires immense courage, because it means standing against what society labels as sacred. It means risking condemnation, isolation, and even hatred. But Nietzsche insists this is the path to freedom. The ruthless win because they do not allow themselves to be chained by comforting lies. They live in alignment with reality, not with illusions. And in a world where most people are paralyzed by the values of the herd, this gives them an enormous advantage. Ultimately, ruthlessness in this sense is the art of clarity. It is the refusal to be blinded by myths, no matter how attractive or widely accepted they may be. By cutting through false values, the ruthless individual discovers a raw, unfiltered vision of life. It is from this vision that strength, creation, and greatness are born. Those who cling to illusions live small lives, bound by invisible chains. Those who break them, however ruthless they may seem, walk free, and in freedom they triumph. Respect, as Nietzsche saw it, is never granted through weakness, submission, or constant pleas for approval. It is not won by being agreeable or endlessly kind. In fact, he argued that such traits often invite exploitation rather than admiration. To be respected, one must embody strength, and often that strength is perceived as fearsome, as ruthless. For Nietzsche, respect is born not from conforming to the herd, but from rising above it, so visibly, so powerfully, that others cannot help but acknowledge your presence. Ruthlessness, then, becomes the path by which strength is asserted and respect is demanded. Fear and respect are more closely related than most people would like to admit. When someone demonstrates that they are willing to act decisively, to make hard choices, and to stand firm in the face of opposition, others instinctively respond with a mixture of fear and admiration. This is not because such a person is cruel, but because they embody an independence of spirit that most people lack. The ruthless individual is not swayed by guilt, flattery, or the shallow judgments of the herd. Their clarity of will, their refusal to bow, forces others to recalibrate how they interact with them. Respect arises not because they are loved, but because they cannot be ignored. Nietzsche criticized the morality of pity because it weakens people, making them docile and easily controlled. The ruthless, however, do not invite pity. They radiate an aura of strength that sets them apart. Even those who dislike them are compelled to respect them. History provides countless examples of figures who commanded loyalty, fear, and reverence not through gentleness, but through the sheer force of their will. Leaders, revolutionaries, and creators often inspired resistance and hatred, but they were respected precisely because they stood unshaken, unapologetic, and resolute. In the personal sphere, this dynamic is just as true. People respect boundaries when they are enforced with firmness. They respect decisions when they are made with confidence. They respect individuals who do not crumble under pressure or allow themselves to be manipulated. To be ruthless, in this sense, means to embody a kind of unyielding authenticity, an unwillingness to betray one's own vision in exchange for approval. Such individuals are feared because they cannot be easily swayed or controlled. And paradoxically, this fear deepens into respect, because strength commands recognition in a way weakness never can. The herd will often criticize ruthlessness as arrogance or cruelty, but beneath their criticism lies envy. Most people secretly wish they had the strength to be unapologetic, to live by their own rules, to demand respect rather than beg for it. The ruthless individual exposes this weakness simply by existing. They remind others of what they have denied within themselves: the will to power, the courage to stand alone, the strength to impose meaning on their lives. Respect, then, is not the reward for kindness or conformity. It is the natural consequence of strength. And strength, as Nietzsche saw it, requires ruthlessness, the refusal to compromise with weakness, the courage to face conflict head-on, and the will to assert one's existence without apology. Those who are ruthless are feared, yes, but they are also respected because they embody the truth that respect is born from power, not from obedience. Creation, in Nietzsche's philosophy, is never born from comfort, conformity, or timidity. To create is to break, to disrupt, to destroy what already exists in order to bring forth something new. And this act of creation always requires ruthlessness. It demands the ability to cut through tradition, to endure rejection, and to face the chaos that comes with originality. The herd, content with repetition and safety, clings to what already is. But the ruthless individual dares to step beyond the familiar, not just to live within the world, but to reshape it. This is why Nietzsche believed that ruthlessness is essential for leaving behind a legacy. The creative process, whether in art, philosophy, politics, or life itself, involves tearing down illusions and confronting hard truths. The person who fears conflict or seeks universal approval will never achieve this. Their creations will be diluted, safe, and forgettable. The ruthless creator, however, embraces the risk of being misunderstood, hated, or condemned. They know that greatness is never achieved by pleasing the masses. To carve a legacy, one must be willing to disrupt the present in order to give birth to the future. This disruption often appears ruthless because it refuses to honor the sacred illusions of the herd. Consider the thinkers, leaders, and artists who changed history. From Nietzsche's perspective, their impact was not the result of conformity, but of defiance. They were ruthless in their vision, willing to burn bridges, to sacrifice approval, and even to endure exile or persecution for the sake of what they believed in. Their legacies live on precisely because they refused to compromise. They valued truth, creativity, and strength over comfort, reputation, or fleeting acceptance. Their ruthlessness ensured that their work did not dissolve into mediocrity, but instead stood apart, sharp, and unforgettable. Ruthlessness also means rejecting half measures. To build something lasting, one cannot be distracted by the noise of others or weakened by constant self-doubt. The ruthless individual pursues their vision with relentless intensity, even when the world resists. They understand that creation requires sacrifice, of safety, of ease, sometimes even of personal relationships. But in this sacrifice, they give birth to something larger than themselves. And it is in this larger creation that their legacy is formed. The herd often condemns such individuals in their own lifetime, dismissing them as dangerous, arrogant, or misguided. But history tells us that the very people once scorned as ruthless visionaries are later celebrated as geniuses. Their legacies endure not because they followed the rules, but because they shattered them. Ruthlessness, in this sense, is not about cruelty. It is about commitment. The commitment to one's vision, to one's will, to one's destiny. In the end, ruthlessness paves the way for creation and legacy because it refuses compromise with mediocrity. It is the sharp edge that cuts through illusion, the fire that burns away comfort, and the strength that carries vision into reality. Those who are ruthless enough to stand alone, to endure misunderstanding, and to impose their vision upon the world may not be loved by the herd, but they will be remembered. Their creations, their ideas, their legacies will echo long after the voices of the crowd have faded. And in Nietzsche's eyes, this is the highest victory, the triumph of the creator who dares to be ruthless enough to leave a mark on existence itself.